Today's show is brought to you by Sawyer. Sawyer's the same guys that make the microfilters and water filters, but here's something else they do. Are you aware that Lyme disease, which is spread by ticks, is the fastest growing infectious disease in the United States and has been found in all 50 states? Lyme disease can cause neurological disorders such as Bell's palsy, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, and even severe allergies to red meat. That will make you a vegan. You gotta watch out for that. Sawyer's permethrin insect repellent repels and kills ticks, mosquitoes, and more than 55 other types of insects. It is designed for shoes, clothing, backpacks, and other outdoor gear, and will even be safe for your dog. It provides an odorless barrier for protection that lasts for up to 6 weeks and can go through the washing machine 6 times. If you use Sawyer's permethrin on your shoes, that makes you 74 times less likely to be bitten by a tick. And if you're not bitten by a tick, well, then things are good for you as a backpacker. So tell us about this great trip that you're going on. Right now, you started in Alameda, California, which is next to San Francisco, and then you decided to just go east, but without planes.
That's right. So the specific goal is to go around the world, San Francisco to San Francisco, without using airplanes. And so, I started there. I took the Amtrak across the United States, and then I took a container ship across the ocean, and then lots of different vehicular transportation across Europe, and got stuck a couple of times along the way, including right now. But my goal is to just finish all the way up and make it back to San Francisco.
It's always the mishaps that always make the best travel stories. They suck when you're in the middle of it, but on the other hand, they always are the ones that intrigue all the armchair travelers out here.
Yeah, I completely agree. And actually, those mishaps were the thing that I was most excited about when I decided to do this trip. That's actually the reason I'm doing it instead of flying.
Tell us about that.
So I can tell you the very first mishap I had, I get to the train station, my very first train. This is in Emeryville, California. I get to the Amtrak station. I've never taken an Amtrak before. I go up to the woman at the counter just to ask if I'm at the right place, and she's like, well, that train doesn't come here. And I'm like, what do you mean it doesn't come here? I have a ticket that says it's here. And she's like, that sucks. The train doesn't come here. And I'm like, okay, well, can you help me at all? And she's like, the train actually got stuck in Reno overnight, and it didn't make it here, and it's not coming here today. And I'm like, okay, well, what are we going to do? And they're like, we're going to get you somehow over to Reno. And they did somehow. We took a train to Sacramento and then a bus to Reno. And there were several mishaps along the way. Amtrak obviously was having a bad day. They didn't schedule the right number of buses or even any buses when we got to Sacramento. So we had to wait for about an hour for the first bus. And then they're like, oh, we need more people. So another hour to get the second bus. And then we get to Reno and the train still isn't ready. So, about 5 hours delay on my very first day before I even start really moving.
Right.
And just that kind of thing happened throughout the entire thing. And it's exactly what I wanted. I wanted to see how things work in the real world. It's more personal rather than, I think, as many people as possible cramped into an airplane, not really talking to each other. I immediately, right off the bat, got to see very friendly people at the Amtrak station, very angry people at the Amtrak station.
Hey.
Off the cuff, it was exactly what I wanted.
Are you kind of a spoiled brat in real life? Are you doing this for masochistic reasons, like you need to man up a bit?
I don't think anything like that. I don't think I'm spoiled, but I am very stoic, and I do like seeing just a different perspective on things. And it's slow travel. It's the more interesting way to travel.
No, I agree. But I sometimes I get a sense I don't know if this is a good analogy, but with Eat, Pray, Love, she just wants to get out of her comfort zone and go somewhere. And a lot of travelers, they kind of live a cushy life more or less. And they're like, you know what? I need to shake things up a bit and kind of, so I wasn't sure if you're kind of going in with that mindset, or it sounds more like you're just a stoic person in general and you enjoy the simplicity of life and just simple things and whether it's the challenges that come with that. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's right. And it's also, I want to see as much as I can see. I've lived a pretty well-traveled life even before this trip, doing things like, going and climbing mountains. So the idea for this trip, I was climbing Kilimanjaro, and at the end of that trip, when I was on the plane ride back home, I was thinking about all of the things I'd done on this trip, and it turns out like climbing Kilimanjaro was a lot of fun, but what I really enjoyed most was all of the other little side trips that we did along the way of the main mountain. And that was the thing where it really started me thinking like, okay, I should do a trip that's all about the little side trips. And that's kind of the beginning of this idea to go around the world without airplanes.
Now, a lot of people love to criticize Amtrak. And how, in your experience, since you've taken already a lot of trains in Europe, and Europe, I guess, for many people, except for maybe Japan, is kind of like the ideal form of train, like the epitome of great train travel. How do you feel Amtrak stacks up with Europe so far? And you've gone all the way out to Eastern Russia.
That's true. Pretty terribly. As far as trains go, it's not. it's not in the top of the list at all. On the train, it was really nice, really high quality. The viewing, I was on, the banner, top of the line train that they take through the Rocky Mountains. It's got the observation cars, the restaurant, the Art Deco, everything. Very nice on the inside, but still running about 5 hours late. And then I took several other trains throughout the USA on Amtrak, and they also had their own set of problems. Oftentimes involving getting off the train and onto a bus. So that should tell you something about the quality of trains. But I will say that Amtrak is still leagues ahead of any form of water travel.
Okay, so tell us about that. So you it looks like from your map, did you get to Florida or did you get off before Florida?
So I took the Amtrak to New Orleans and I took a Greyhound to Miami from New Orleans.
Got it. And, okay, got it.
So in Miami, I did a little bit of a mini vacation with some Floridian friends. I'm originally from Florida. But the ship that I was taking was a container ship, leaving Miami and going to Spain. And it was scheduled to leave and take 9 days at sea. Oh, no, sorry. It was scheduled to take 11 days at sea, a little less than 2 weeks. And I, again, haven't ever used a port before. Never even been on a cruise ship, so I don't know what to expect. It's not like an airport. I call the guy that I have the number for, and I ask him, okay, well, where do I go tomorrow for my ship? And he's like, ship's not here. Try again tomorrow. And he just didn't really give me any
That kind of sounds like Amtrak in Alameda.
Yeah, it's a theme.
That was the same basic thing. It's like, exactly. There's a theme here going on. Your mode of transportation has not yet arrived.
Yeah. But for this, it actually was not just 1 day. It was actually 3 days delayed before I could finally get on this ship.
Amtrak is looking really good right at this point.
Yeah, exactly. And so that was that. And then later on in Azerbaijan, I actually spent 9 days waiting for a ferry across the Caspian Sea. So that was just absolutely crazy.
Yeah. No, that sounds more accurate. I was in Comoros waiting for a ferry for 3 weeks, and finally I said, just fuck it. I'm just going to go take a fucking plane because I was just so tired of waiting for 3 weeks, waiting for a damn boat to show up. You have to have a certain amount of patience in certain parts of the world. So let's take a step backwards first, Ryan, and tell me, how did you find this container ship? Like if somebody's listening to this and say, you know what? That sounds so cool. I would love to wait a couple of days for a ship and go across the ocean. I want to do the same thing like Ryan. How does somebody go about doing this? Let's say if you're in the United States.
Yeah, well, I totally down to sell people on the idea. So the way it works is there's a bunch of agents who just have contacts at the various shipping companies, and there's no fixed itineraries or anything. You just kind of say, I'm looking to get generally from this part of the world to generally this part. And they'll kind of look and do some research and come up with the lines that they can put you on. And the rules for a container ship, you can't have more than a dozen passengers on it, period. Any more than that, and legally speaking, you have to have a doctor on the ship, and that's expensive. So they can't have more than 12. But once you look through your options and you find it, you get on this ship maybe a couple days late, but it's this very serene, calm experience. When I was sitting there in the middle of the ocean, there was no internet. There was an email machine. I could send emails, but it would take up to like 6 hours for the email to even leave the boat and get to the person I was emailing. So very isolated experience. But yeah, all you have to do is email the various travel agents. I used a guy in South Africa. His name is Hamish. If you Google for container ship cruises or cargo cruises, you'll find him pretty quickly. And he has routes all over the world.
This is all kind of a lot of hand holding in order to get this done. It's not like as easy as going on to Kayak or to website like Expedia or something like that, where you just say, I want to go from here to here, or this general. You have to talk to an individual on the phone, old school fashion, and just say, hey, I want to roughly go from the North America to Europe. How can I do that on a container ship? And they walk you through.
And you can't pick your dates. Mm-hmm. You can't pick your dates, and you also can't even be specific once you have the dates, because as I found out, the ship might be several days delayed.
Right. What's the cost of going across, let's say, the Atlantic? How much did you have to pay for that wonderful trip across the ocean?
Yeah, the costs for container ship cruises are very expensive. It's substantially more expensive than a passenger cruise of the same duration or distance. But pretty much worldwide, whatever route you're on, you're going to be looking at 100 to 300 euro a night for your room. You do get more space than you would on a passenger ship, but it is pretty expensive. So, I budgeted basically 2,000 euro to get across the Atlantic Ocean.
Okay, so it takes about 10 days or so?
Yeah, week and a half.
During those 10 days, do they also provide food for you?
Yes. So you get 3 meals a day, and they're really nice meals as well. You're eating with the captain, and those ships are as big as a small city and have 30 people on it. They have so much food. The particular company that I went with was a French company, so naturally there was a French wine with every dinner. They had coffee in the wheelhouse every morning. I was talking to the officers on watch. Great food. Everything was paid for. Like, there was no way you could possibly even spend money on the ship.
Who are the other passengers that are on? I mean, who are these crazy wackos that are with you side by side at the dinner player? Besides the captain, I'm talking about the passengers like you. Who else are these?
Yeah. People? Well, on my particular cruise, there was only one other passenger. He was a recently retired Frenchman who his grandson was born in the USA, and he hadn't seen his grandson yet. So he took since he was just retired, he took a cruise across the ocean one way, and now he was on a cruise back. And that was the only other passenger.
But if you're saying that it's cheaper to take, let's say, a Princess cruise or some sort of standard commercial boat across, why would anybody pay for having the container ship experience, which sounds, on the face of it, to be less luxurious and more expensive?
It is less luxurious in some ways. But if you are interested in a very serene experience, like if I wanted to, I could walk anywhere on the ship, all around to the bow. I could go to the wheelhouse. I could sit out on the deck and sunbathe, and just a completely empty ocean, no people around whatsoever. So it's very serene and peaceful. So if you're looking for that experience, that's something that you can only get from the container ship. And then also you get to do cool stuff. I did a tour of the engine room. They let me drive the container ship for a couple of minutes. I walked around all over the deck and, explored the bow and got to do the Titanic scene by myself and all of that stuff. So, just you get a lot more freedom, even though it's, less luxurious. There's no casino or shows.
Got it. And so, and you knew that you could have taken a regular passenger ship. Was it just because you wanted a little more oddball experience for why you picked a container ship, or was there some other driving force? Because I always thought, people take container ships because they're cheap as hell, but obviously you blew that notion out of the water. So, why didn't you just say, I'm going to go to Miami and take a nice, cushy boat across the ocean like so many other people do.
Well, for me, there are, in a weird way, you get more freedom with the passenger ships. So, I mean, that freedom is a two-way street, right? With the container ships, you get a weird kind of more freedom. With the passenger ships, they have a fixed itinerary. It's these days, and it'll get you to where you're going. But at the same time, it's also very seasonal. So if you're not in the right season, they just don't run the passenger cruises. Cargo ships run year-round. Another aspect of it is you do get more leeway with the actual dates, because the passenger cruises only run when they get a full boat. The container ships run when they get a full cargo boat, and there's always a backlist, so like they're much more frequent.
This is a kind of an economics question, but I was just curious if you found out something about global trade, because we always talk about the United States having a trade deficit. So I'm just wondering if when the ship is going back to Europe, is it going like 75% empty? Sorry, not 75, 25% empty. Or is it, I imagine, fully, full of goods and services? Maybe those goods and services are less expensive than the ones that came in.
The particular ship that I was on was not full when it was traveling to Europe, but it was reasonably full. However, I do know that a lot of that was just because, like, if it was going from Northern Europe to Southern Europe, it might have been cheaper to put it on a ship going all the way around to the America on that. But it was not empty. It was over half full.
Got it. And I'm going now, by the way, for those who are listening to this and curious where his trip, you go to polarsteps.com and your username is CRyanRamble. And that should get you to Ryan Patterson's page there, where you can actually see his GPS trail, which sometimes shows at the beginning as an airplane, but as we know, he took an Amtrak. But it looks like you landed in Gibraltar, or very close to Gibraltar.
Yeah, it's the Bay of Gibraltar. There's a city on the other side, and that's where I got to Spain.
That's right, Algeciras. That's funny, because that's where I left. I left Algeciras on a boat to go to Morocco. So you kind of arriving there, I kind of left there. Anyway, from there you went to Gibraltar, and then you cut across to Madrid, Barcelona. And by the way, this is all happening right before the Coronapocolypse crushed us. So you were having a good old time.
Yeah.
Right?
This was last year. I spent all of last year doing this trip. So the coronavirus didn't set in until early this year.
Which was great. I mean, you were lucky you were lucky to see all of Europe and before the restrictions go. And Spain got hit hard by the Coronapocolypse. So you lucked out there. So tell us about Western Europe first, and tell us about any highlights there.
So I think one of my greatest fears as a traveler was always going to a country where I didn't speak the language. And so that actually factored into where I was planning on traveling when I was, routing out my whole circumnavigation. As an American, I was exposed to Spanish in school, but I never learned it. So I actually spent a lot of my downtime in the ship, on this container ship, learning Spanish, studying it. And so I was able to kind of talk my way through basic interactions, buying things or getting bus tickets, that kind of thing in Spanish. I don't speak a word of French.
What percentage of the Spaniards were speaking English, were capable of speaking English, as far as you could tell?
In Madrid and Barcelona, it was easy. But when I was in Algeciras and, the villages in Andalusia, not much at all. Like, a couple people knew a couple of words, but for the most part, the communication was entirely in Spanish. So I don't speak a word of French, so I kind of arranged the entire trip according to difficulty. I started going across America because I speak English and I'm an American, so it's easy. I figured Western Europe would be pretty English friendly, and kind of as the trip went on, it would get harder and harder. Now that I'm in Russia, East Asia, especially a lot of the countries that are not known for their English, speaking population, it was going to be more difficult. So France was my first big challenge. I don't speak a word of it. I was very nervous about going there. I didn't end up staying very long just as a result of that fear. And I hopped over to Switzerland. And I met a couple people, extended friend network in Switzerland, and that was quite nice. And Swiss people speak fantastic English, in many ways better than a lot of English speakers speak English, so that was really easy. And I spent about a week and a half, staying with some friends and then doing a little bit of house sitting in Zurich, before moving on to Vienna. And then, yeah, I think for most of the Eastern Europe stuff, I was doing the normal like backpacker, staying in hostels, moving on.
Were you doing it 100% on trains, or were you doing some buses too? A little bit of both.
For most of this, it was on trains. I did meet some people in a hostel in Austria, and we did a rideshare together for part of the journey. But pretty much all of this Western Europe and Central Europe was on trains.
Let's take a 60-second break to thank one of our sponsors, icelab.co. This is the best time to move to the mountain town of your dreams. COVID-19 has changed how the world does business, and many people are now working remotely. So why not live in the mountain paradise you've always dreamed of? The Gunnison Valley in Colorado is that perfect place. Why? Because it's nestled between 4 spectacular mountain ranges. It has 750 miles of biking and hiking, and crested buttes, world-class skiing. And then there's that award-winning school system. It's got it all. Now imagine waking up in your ultimate destination every morning. No traffic, no crowded trails, no more wishing you lived in the mountains. Work where you play in Gunnison Valley. To start living your dream, visit icelab.co. That's icelab.co.
So I spent a week in Bulgaria doing house sitting, and I ended up getting there around May, so still early summertime.
And in Bulgaria, how was your English ability to find English speakers in Bulgaria in Sofia?
When I was in Sofia, it was fine. It was very. I was staying at a hostel. I was going to there were walking tours that were in English language. Like it was very accessible for English speakers there.
So far, you have not been traumatized by your childhood fear of a lack of English speakers.
The only traumatic experience I had up to that point was a woman at my hostel in France said "bonne journée" to me.
Oh my God!
Which means good day. And I was like, oh my gosh, did I not pay my bill or something? Like I just didn't understand it all. So. Yeah, no, I did start to get into the challenging. It ended up being better than I thought in my fears. It got challenging once I got to Turkey. That's really where things got difficult. I remember I arrived in Turkey on bus early in the morning, and I was doing a workaway. A workaway is basically you do a volunteer at some venue for some period of time, typically around a month. They pay for generally room and board. So I was going to a Turkish vineyard to work on the vineyard, and where I was very rural Turkey, and no one spoke any English whatsoever. I remember I got on a bus, hoping to go to the little village that I was going to. Which, if you're going towards Istanbul, it's easy, and if you're not, you're on your own. I got on the bus and it started going, and then it didn't go to the turn I thought it was going to. So I got off at the next city, and none of the people at the bus station spoke any English. And I just arrived in Turkey. I didn't have a cell phone with internet or anything. I ended up drawing a map of the area on my notebook, and I circled the city I want to go to, and I just pointed at that until someone finally understood what I was looking for. Very friendly, helped me out, put me on the bus. I still wasn't totally sure, but as I was looking, it's okay, this is going the right direction. And that was my first big, I think, language challenge.
And then you got from Turkey, you went to Georgia, Azerbaijan, and then it looks like from Azerbaijan you took a boat from Baku to across the sea there. I forgot the name of the sea. Is that Caspian Sea or something? Caspian
Sea, yeah. I got to Georgia. And my original plan, when I was planning out my whole trip, I was going to go to Georgia and use that as a base. They have a very friendly visa policy. If you're American, you can just go there for a year, visa on arrival.
Nice.
So I was okay, I'll go there. I'll plan out the rest of my trip. And my goal was to take a train across Kazakhstan into China and then Southeast Asia. And this is summer of last year, way before coronavirus was a thing. But China rejected me and did not give me a visa. I believe the reason for that was, ironically, because I visited Turkey. They made me provide additional evidence, and they said I could possibly get a visa if I went to the embassy for China in Houston, Texas, and appeared in person to do an interview. I might be able to get a visa for China. So they rejected me, and I kind of had to come up with a backup plan, and that's actually why I'm in Russia right now. I was sitting in Georgia comparing options. Like, there's not a lot of ways for a U.S. citizen to get, to the Pacific Ocean from Georgia without using airplanes. That's kind of a difficult part of the world.
Right. But hold on one second. I just want to try to understand. Did you go to the Chinese embassy in Georgia?
I went to the Chinese embassy in Georgia, and they rejected me outright. They're like, you don't have a permanent resident Georgian permanent residency permit, so you have to apply through the U.S. embassy. I mailed the passport to the USA because there was a company that specializes in providing Chinese visas and will help do all of the paperwork for you, and they guided me through the process, and they accepted my passport and delivered it to the embassy. And then I got rejected from that embassy as a result of me not being able to appear in person.
Oh, you mean like the embassy in Washington, D.C.?
In Houston. Because yeah.
That's a consulate, effectively.
Yeah.
Chinese consulate. Okay, so let me just summarize to make sure I understand this. What happened is you went to the embassy of China in Georgia. I forgot the capital of Georgia.
Tbilisi.
From there, they said, apply. You cannot apply here because you're not a resident of Georgia. You have to apply from your home country. And you're like, okay. Instead of applying directly to the Washington, D.C. embassy, you went to the consulate in Houston.
No. The requirement for China is you have to apply at the consulate that is closest to your state of residence. As I mentioned, I'm originally from Florida. The closest one is Houston, Texas. So all of the embassies that are in the United States for China, there are 5. I have to go to the Houston one to get a visa.
And then you applied, and because you're not there in person, they rejected you. But you suspect that it has to do more with the fact that you went to Turkey, but you have no evidence and you're not sure.
Exactly, yeah. The company that I was with had me actually provide extra supporting information. I had to write a letter saying why I had the audacity to visit Turkey. I mentioned how beautiful the winery was, but it wasn't compelling.
Oh, that's incredible. I mean, it does have a nice winery. They should understand that. I guess they don't.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you were in Georgia for how many months?
6 months. So what happened was at the end of the first month, I had been rejected and needed to come up with a backup plan. I decided to go to Russia, but I thought to myself, well, if I'm going to be going through Siberia, I should go when it's the proper time to go to Siberia, which is naturally when everything is a frozen wasteland. So I waited until the middle of February to leave Georgia to get to Russia.
Got it. Okay. And was, in retrospect, that a brilliant move or not?
With the exception of the coronavirus, yes. I went ice diving in Lake Baikal. Lake Baikal is the largest freshwater lake in Asia. It's got a lot of actual titles to its name. It's huge, it's freshwater, and it freezes completely solid in winter because it's so damn cold. And
I think it's also the deepest lake in the world as well.
And it's beautiful. It's totally beautiful. So I did ice diving there for a week. We would, drive out onto the ice in a car, drive out onto the lake, stick a chainsaw into the ground and jump in there for an hour every day. And then once I was on that trip, I was there on Olhon Island, and that's when borders started closing because of coronavirus.
Got it.
At that point, I looked into my future, and my goal is my next country when I was still traveling was either Korea or Japan, and those were both one of the earliest and heaviest hit coronavirus countries. So it just immediately just pulled the brakes on my trip, and well, then I've been here for the next couple months.
Great. So give us, before you tell us about how you got to Lake Baikal and all that stuff, how was the visa process from Turkey onward? Obviously you got dinged by China, but you did get a visa to Azerbaijan, you got a visa to Kazakhstan, and of course to Russia. I don't know if you went to Kyrgyzstan or not. I guess you didn't. But how were those visas that you were getting along the way in Asia, starting from Turkey? Was it visa on arrival or difficult?
One of the things I did when I started my trip was actually I had a printed out map of the U.S. on corkboard, and I put a little colored pin in each country according to the visa process. And that was one of the critical pieces of me coming up with my route. Turkey was e-visa. I actually just, when I was on the bus headed to the border, I applied for the visa and paid the fee and got it. It was on my phone, didn't have to print anything out. Pretty easy. Georgia, I already mentioned, there's no process. You can just stay for a year. Azerbaijan was another e-visa. I had to do that one a little bit in advance and print it out, but nothing crazy. Kazakhstan was visa on arrival, so that was nice and easy, and I think you can stay for a month. And then Russia is tricky. It's not instantaneous. You have to mail your passport and get the permit, and it takes a while. But at least when I did this last year, U.S. citizens can get a 3-year-long visa, multiple entry, 6 months at a time with no dates on it. So, after I had that visa, it was easy to manage.
Oh, really? Okay. And then you got that Russian visa where exactly? What embassy?
Sorry, you're right. I didn't have to mail it in. So I got it in Georgia, but it's a little bit awkward because of the political situation between Russia and Georgia. The Swiss embassy actually is like an entourage between the two governments. So you go to the Swiss embassy to get your Russian visa while you're in Georgia.
That's funny. So much for the Swiss being neutral. How about that, Swiss guys?
Hey, they're orchestrating. That's the definition of neutrality to me.
Okay, all right, fine. I think they're Russian spies. That's what I'm telling. That's the story. I'm sticking to it.
Maybe.
Okay. Okay. So what, Ryan? How the hell are you going to cross the Pacific Ocean? Well, I mean, I realize the bigger challenge at this point that you're facing is how do I even get to the Pacific Ocean? But are you hoping to get to Vladivostok, which is one of the easternmost cities of Russia?
I am, but there's one detail that I haven't mentioned yet, which is I didn't actually go around the world. I'm not halfway around the world yet until I visited 2 points on the opposite side of the globe. So there's this village in Spain that I went to, and there's this nice church plaza. It's circular, and right in the center of that is a GPS point that I picked. And if you go there and you dig straight down, and you don't stop until you get to the surface again, you pop out in Auckland, New Zealand. So before I can go back to San Francisco, I have to get to Auckland, New Zealand. And originally, I was planning on getting to Japan and figuring something out. I didn't have a fixed plan, but my ideas were either cargo ship container or a container ship down to New Zealand or private sailboat down to New Zealand. And I'd like to do a whole tour of like Southeast Asia. Hopefully, I was thinking maybe Vietnam and like cruise through Indonesia over land, and then possibly Australia to New Zealand. How is up in the air because there's not really many fixed options. There are some passenger cruises that I was looking at, but it would depend on the time of year. And since coronavirus happened, I haven't been able to pick any specific dates yet. But it's still going to be a long time before I actually cross the Pacific Ocean.
Now, you have a mustache. Now, how is it traveling with a mustache? Because I imagine that when you see another guy with a mustache, you kind of look at each other and you're like, yeah, dude, we're part of the same club. Or is there any of that going on? Am I just completely making this up? I can be pulling this all out of my ass right now.
I do get a lot of commentary on it. Actually, right now I'm rocking a beard. And to be completely honest, that has mostly to do with that's what the women in this part of the world seem to prefer.
I love your logic here. Here we go.
I solicit opinions as often as possible, and since I've been in Georgia, the Georgian beard game is so strong. But the women seem to like it that way, so I started growing with the beard, and then when I was in Kazakhstan and still Russia, I think it's pretty similar. I think in Russia it's probably easier for me to get away with the mustache, but I haven't gone back to it yet this summer.
Some great photos at Polar Steps. I don't know if that's your main website or if you have another one that you prefer to send people to.
Mostly actually on my Instagram. It's Instagram/C Ryan Ramble, SEE Ryan RYAN Ramble RAMBLE. I was going to do some writing, blogging, but it turns out writing is really hard. So I haven't actually done it.
Yes, I can vouch for that completely, as I'm still stuck in my Africa book. Now, what's your favorite city in the world besides Kotor, Montenegro? Because I'm just biasing you there.
Kotor was beautiful. I would say that's probably not my favorite.
Hold on, you're just saying it's beautiful? That's it? That's all you got to say? Beautiful? Kotor is beautiful? Come on, dude. Say something more, exciting about Kotor. It's my favorite city in Europe.
I'll say something more exciting about Urtvezlo, which is a tiny city on Lusica Peninsula, which is basically just towards the coast from Kotor. And that's where my step-grandfather lives, and that was just beautiful. He lives right on the coast. I stayed there for a week. We drank rakia and coffee every morning and would walk around, and whenever he got tired, he's 84 years old. Whenever he would get tired, we would go to a cafe and either grab a rakia or a coffee. And that was just a beautiful experience. I absolutely loved that about Montenegro.
Is he the guy with a patch on his eye?
Yes, that's right. He's got one eye. He's the village pirate. He actually has a pirate flag above his house in this little town.
Were you ever camping during this whole time, or were you always staying in hostels or on a hammocks?
I did actually a camping trip in Georgia. I got into a fight with a stray dog actually while I was doing that. It was quite an adventure.
Tell us about that stray dog. How was that?
So there's this famous hike in Georgia. It's 4 days long. It's in the Sveneti region of Georgia, and it's Mestia to Ushguli, or the two cities at either ends. And me and two of my friends did this hike, and we finished the first day, about 8 hours of hiking, and we arrive at a guest house. We're staying in a guest house that night, and there's a dog and some children playing in the front yard, and we settle in, and communication's a little difficult. The kids speak English, the adults speak Russian, and of course everyone who lives there speaks Georgian, but I don't speak any Russian, or I didn't at the time, and I don't speak any Georgian. So I was speaking with the kids. They told me that the dog's name was Voldemort, and they were just playing with him, so I love dogs, so I kind of played with him for a little bit. But then later on that night, I was moving from, my bedroom to another building in the complex, and the Voldemort was lying there on the ground, so I leaned down and pet him as I'm walking by, but I move in a little bit too quickly, and I scare him, and he snaps at me. And I don't know what the right thing to do when a dog snaps at you, but what I decided to do was engage the dog rather than retreat. My logic there is if I back up, he might actually just continue grabbing at me and cut the flesh. He hasn't done that yet. He just snapped at me. So I grab the dog by his cheeks, and we're scrapping for a little bit, but he hasn't actually bitten me because I've grabbed the side of his head so he can't turn and bite me. And I kind of push him down, and okay, I successfully have control of the situation. I survived this dog fight. I know not to touch this dog anymore.
You have successfully fought off Voldemort.
Fought off Voldemort. But I'm still holding this dog, and I don't really know what to do. The woman, the grandmother who lives at this guest house has come out, and she's got a big stick, and she's ready to hit this dog to scare it away from me. And my buddy comes over, and he's like, "What's going on?" And I'm like, "I don't really know what's going on." And I just we kind of wait there, slow count to 3. I'm like, okay, I'm going to let go. 1, 2, 3. And I let go as quick as possible. But he had one more bite left in him, and he snapped at me, and he did exactly what I was afraid of. He tore into my arm, and immediately there's blood everywhere. I honestly don't know exactly what happened. I think he was running away from me, because at that point I just walked away from him, went into the kitchen, and started scrubbing my wounds.
Oh God!
But what I found out later was that dog was not the guest house dog. It was actually a stray dog that had wandered in. But the only people who were at this guest house were, the mom, the children, and the grandma, and they were waiting for the husband to come home and get the dog away. The dog had already bitten grandma earlier that day, but because there was no communication between us, they spoke Russian, we spoke English, and Georgian. We didn't get that message. So I had to spend the next 2 hours in a rickety minivan driving through very rickety mountain roads. We literally spent some of the time driving through a river, upstream, not across, to get to the hospital back in Mestia. Got my rabies shot, drove all the way back. And then that dog had a pretty bad rest of his night. All of the men in the village got together and kind of just chased him off.
Oh, poor thing.
Yeah, it was a poor thing, but the next morning he was waiting outside the fence. And you could tell it was him because he had a splash of my blood across his forehead, and he was just waiting outside that fence.
Is your final boat trip back to California, is it going to take you to Hawaii, or how are you going? Or are you going to go? I've seen this map on Instagram, your very first picture, and it looks like you're taking the Southern Ocean underneath Ushuaia and underneath Tierra del Fuego to get back, but maybe I'm misreading the map.
Yeah, that's actually just an artifact of the paper map. I didn't have an actual globe. No, my goal, it would be wonderful to go to Hawaii, and like take a cruise from New Zealand to Hawaii and then stay in Hawaii for a bit, and then Hawaii to either LA or San Francisco directly. I don't know what it's going to look like for me. It will depend a lot on the mode of transportation that I get. If it's a passenger cruise, it'll probably be New Zealand to Hawaii, Hawaii to LA. If I can find just somebody who's sailing that direction, I might try and just get like a private sailboat and go with them. Mm-hmm. That's not a super common direction though. The winds kind of blow the wrong way for that, so it might be tricky. And then also there's just some part of me that would love to just like island hop for a while, you know, all of the Pacific islands, and, you know, meander my way slowly.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. It sounds like a fabulous trip. What kind of advice would you give people who are foolish enough to follow your footsteps?
Don't plan too hard. I don't think I did. I did have a detailed plan where, like I said, I plotted out all of the countries, but, you know, as soon as I encountered one roadblock, I had to pretty majorly change my plans around. You know, I originally wanted to go through China. China was blocked off, and it turns out China's a really big chunk of land to navigate around. And I guess the other piece of advice would be watch out for the oceans. I know a lot of other people who've attempted to do circumnavigations like this. Ocean borders and land borders cause a lot more difficulty than air borders do, than airport borders do.
Expand on that idea, because I agree with you, but expand more. But
so I've heard one fella who was attempting to, I think, motorbike from UK to Australia, ended up getting all the way to Papua New Guinea and was unable to get into Australia because they just don't like boats coming in. I've been warned by a lot of Australians that it's very difficult to get into Australia overseas. And so he had to take a flight, just a small little hop, to get across, you know, the 70 kilometers of water between Australia and this Papua New Guinea, or I think it's Timor, was the actual country. So watch out for the water borders, and where else has been problems as far as land? I know a lot of visas are visa on arrival if you arrive at an airport. If you don't arrive at an airport, you have to have a visa ahead of time. So that can be a gotcha if you're just kind of glancing over the visa restrictions. That hasn't bitten me yet, but it's come close several times. Now,
during the bulk of the Coronapocolypse, you have been in Siberia. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah. I think it started happening when I was in Azerbaijan. I met some Chinese tourists who were having a terrible time being abroad when all of this was happening. But yeah, borders started closing once I got to Russia.
How has the world looked to you from your perspective? In other words, during this whole pandemic going across, does it seem like, oh my God, am I happy to be in Siberia? Or were you thinking that, oh, I know it's not as bad as it looks like in America or wherever you're looking at? What's your perspective on the whole apocalypse?
Yeah, when it was unfolding and there were still flights to and from the U.S., I was like, seriously, like, should I bail on the trip and fly back to the USA? And I was weighing the options out in my head, and it's like, on the one hand, if I get coronavirus, it's probably better for me to be in the USA near family. If I don't get coronavirus, every single reason says it's better for me to be in Russia. Number one being that, you know, if I'm in the USA, it means I bailed on my trip and I took an airplane and I called it quits. You know, this is, in many ways, even though this is a challenge that no one could have predicted, this is just another challenge of overland travel. But also, I'm enjoying the summer and the seasons, and I'm meeting new people, and I'm learning a new language. Personal achievement, just last weekend, I went on a hike with a bunch of people who don't speak English, so, the conversation was entirely in Russian. And, I'm really enjoying that aspect of it. So I'm still able to learn and grow as a person, even while I'm ostensibly trapped here in Siberia.
Got it. Yeah. No, I think that's good advice, that people should embrace misfortune as much as it is. It's hard when you actually have a time deadline. That's the challenge. When you have a trip and you only have 2-week vacation or 3-week vacation, you must get home. Then all of a sudden a 1 or 2 day derailment really can screw things up majorly for you. But if you have an open-ended, just embrace it and roll with the punches. And I think you're doing the right thing in that respect. So I salute you on that. What do you plan to do once you do get back home, Ryan?
The first thing that I'm going to do is a road trip across the USA.
Okay, because you haven't traveled enough, I guess.
I mean, I'm gonna say hi to my friends in San Francisco and whatever. But I want to do a road trip across the USA. And then after that, visit my family. And then after that, leave the USA for the next couple of years. I am going to continue traveling and living abroad. I don't have a specific where. I think I will keep moving. But once I finish this trip, I'm going to start the next trip.
Is that because you're one of those people who says, if Trump does not get elected again, I'm leaving the country?
No, that's not really.
I'm just saying that because I never hear that. I always hear people saying, if Trump gets elected again, I'm leaving the country. So I just figure you might be the opposite. But anyway, but seriously, you will be here maybe for the election time. Who knows? You're probably not going to even make the election. You're going to just have to mail in your ballot, and you're going to be probably, your ballot will be invalidated because it's mailed in from Russia. So you're just skewing the election.
Well, I'm registered in California, so does it matter anyways?
That's true. You're automatically a Democrat. So once you do your little road trip, do you plan to just kind of go back to California? Or you have no idea?
Well, so my family actually moved from Florida to Wisconsin. So my road trip, I think, is just, California to Wisconsin. And then once I land in San Francisco, I'll be allowed to use airplanes again. So it'll be much more easier for me to fly or to travel in general. But yeah, from Wisconsin, then I'll go to wherever I want to go.
Well, let's see Ryan Ramble, which is your handle on Instagram. See Ryan Ramble as an SEE.
That's right.
And then also, if you want to see your little footsteps and train steps and boat steps, what is the name of the website again? It's polarsteps.com.
Polarsteps.com, and then my username there is also C Ryan Ramble.
Great. Well, any other places that people can find you online, or those are the two best?
If you're a Facebook person instead of an Instagram person, I do have a Facebook page. It's Rambling Ryan. If you type in Rambling Ryan, I should come up.
Wonderful.
You'll see a picture, a drawing of me with a lovely mustache.
As they say, хорошо. Спасибо большое. До свидания. And that concludes this episode of the WanderLearn podcast, where we explore travel, technology, and transformation. If you'd like to see the show notes with links to what we talked about, or if you'd like to comment on the show, or if you'd like to ask me a question, then go to wanderlearn.com and click on this episode. If you'd like to connect with me, just remember Tapon. That's my first initial and my last name. Tapon is the username I use on all social media. You can also get to my website by going to ftapon.com. And here's one last reason to remember Tapon. If you like what I do and would like to get rewarded for supporting my projects, then go to patreon.com/ftapon. That's where you can pick up some remarkable rewards for as little as $2 a month. And now for 5 quick favors. Number 1, subscribe to the WanderLearn podcast. 2, download it. 3, share it. 4, review it somewhere. And 5, sign up for my newsletter at wanderlearn.com. Our theme music was composed by Eric Stratman. This is Francis Tapon, encouraging you to wander and learn.